let's get on the line here
Yeah.
with Stephen, and maybe Stephen will spark some confidence in the theistic callers that we really want to call in and just own us like a 1993 Chevy Tahoe. Stephen, you're on Talk Heathen with Katy Montgomerie and myself, and the question that I have here is, how do I help my family to see that the things they're concerned about, LGBTQ people, for example, aren't a threat, and the real threat are things like fascism. That's a real threat. How you doing there? You're on the air with us. What are they saying?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
So the big thing is that most of my family is very heavily leaning conservative, even alt-right in some cases. And a lot of the media that they consume, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, libs of TikTok, blah, 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 have made a lot of them fixated on this idea that the borders are wide open and we're being overrun, and trans people are trying to groom your kids. Like, none of that's happening. Relax. And the things that are actually happening is like all of the businesses that provide essential services to us have no interest in any of our well-being. Our healthcare industry, the places that we get our food, all of these things, huge threats, big deal. Yeah. Very important, should very much be concerned about how to prevent those things from getting worse than they currently are, and not so much on the scary trans people thing.
So I did I did a lot of research for doing a talk on how to combat hate recently. And I was going to give it at university, and then my talk got shut down because they got a load of threats and they needed more security. So that was a bit ironic. But one of the things that I found out...
A talk about hate got shut down.
From it was, it's something to put in the talk when it actually happens. But one of the things that I found, which was mentioned in, studies on how to combat hate and stuff, was about exposing people to groups that they hate and fear. And I think, so in lots of these studies, they found out that if you just create arbitrary groupings of people and tell them about each other and perhaps have competitions or perhaps just have them compete for resources or something, they often did this with like teenage boys in scouts and things, then they would start coming up with ways to describe the other group which were negative, and they would, it would escalate and they would end up like vandalizing each other's stuff and saying they hated each other. And if you then cause them to come together for whatever reason, for like a group activity where they had to work together towards the same goal, or even just spend time around each other, then that hatred diffused. And I think that we see that a lot in civil rights movements. And I think a good example is during the gay panic and the fight for gay rights. When you don't know a gay person and you have no exposure to gay people, and you've been brought up just thinking they're a bit weird and different, if the news tells you that they're out to get your children, or they're doing all these horrible sex things or whatever, then maybe you'll just believe it. But then the problem is you can be told that 100 times over, and you could have that indoctrinated into your mind for years and years and years. And then when you actually meet a gay person, especially if you've got reason to trust them straight away, like they're a family member or a colleague or a friend's friend or something, you'd be like, hang on a minute, this is just nonsense. Like the years of propaganda can just be undone. So in terms of like combating hate on a bigger scale, and especially with trans people and immigrants are, two of the main focuses of the reactionaries at the moment, is to a bigger strategy would be to try and expose people to these people and their ways of life, to just show that they're just the same as everyone else. And that's why things like representation in media can make a big difference. And this is why they fight so hard against representation in media, because they know that it does make a difference. But on a personal level, I mean, if you... The issue is often when you do get in a situation when it's a room full of people who have been fed a load of transphobic propaganda, and then they do encounter a trans person, they've got this wall up in front of them already. The two groups aren't they're already going to be hostile to each other, and it's hard to like kind of diffuse that to get them to the situation when they can be exposed to each other. But if you can get a situation like that, then that can make a big difference. I mean, that's kind of why I do these call-in shows, this one and others, is just to show people that trans people are normal. And so, you know, if you can get any of your family to call in to this show, then I'll talk to them. But in terms of like dealing with family members and arguments, you can sometimes, bring a load of facts, and you can say, oh, well, this is nonsense. There's no evidence for any of these claims, and these people are stigmatized, and we know what happens when fascism gets in power, etc. But their position isn't rational. They're not driven by facts. They're driven by emotions and fear. And so really you've got to combat the emotions by exposing them to stuff. And maybe you can show them media, or find a comedian who they like and then be like, oh, did you know they're a trans person? You didn't know that? Oh, well, they're just normal. Okay. So that kind of stuff can make a difference. But I don't know, Johnny, do you have any thoughts on this?
Isn't it strange how we have this multimedia universe we live in now? You can communicate very easily with people across the globe, and even people in space when they're up there. And you can hello, there's one now, a person across the globe, and all of you out there in YouTube land. But and yet what on one level, oh, it's gonna make us all come together, and we're gonna be able to. I can talk to a classroom of students in Afghanistan, and I can talk with them about what it's like to be, whoever the heck I am. But truth is, dickhead on the internet occasionally. But the truth is, it does that, but just as much, it does exactly the opposite, and it causes people to hunker down, and they find other people who think or claim to think exactly like they do, and it boils down people's extreme positions. And so, exposing oneself to other people, not like that, but exposing yourself to the ideas of other people, I think really is the trick, isn't it? Because it's hard to look somebody in their actual face and tell them that they're not good or bad because of a particular quality that they have. Actions is one thing, it's easy to throw a tomato at a bad politician, but it's not that you should do that, but it's hard to tell a regular citizen that, oh, I don't like you because you're Filipino, or you Protestants are garbage people, or you atheists are scumbags. I mean, I know that people have family members and friends who will say things like that, coworkers. We've had callers about that, I know. But I think on the whole, it's harder to do that in person than it is to do it online. And so if there's a way to drag your family members to have a friend, or like Katy suggested, some media personality to get to subtly to trap them into enjoying what's inside their head, the good ideas they have, and like, oh wait, and they're also LGBTQ. Well, but they're funny. And then maybe over the course of time, I like their jokes. Maybe, but it's about getting them out of that boiled down state, I think.
I think on that, another key part that I found was about deplatforming, and that can be a controversial topic. But there's you can look at this from another perspective. In order to believe all of this horrible stuff about various minorities, they need this constant input. They need, the things you listed, and some of these sites and organizations and people exist just to constantly, like every single hour of the day, promote something to cause rage in people. I mean, that's kind of the point of tabloid newspapers in general, but it's even worse now we have the internet. And sometimes breaking people out of that cycle of constantly reinforcing it. It's like with a cult. Like often you'll hear from people who used to be in cults, they'll say that for some reason, they went on a missionary thing and then they weren't connected to the central office anymore, or that they, had a family member die or something, and they were out of the cycle for a few weeks. And just being out for a few weeks stops you from having this constant reinforcement. And maybe if they all, I don't know if I can call out the same groups you did, but for example, if they would just stop following and watching those garbage accounts for a couple of weeks, they would stop caring about it. Because like in your day-to-day life, you might encounter a trans person, but generally you don't. There are so few of us that you don't really encounter us, and so it's just not an issue. Like if you just lived your life, no one would give a shit about trans people. The only reason they do is because there are millions of trans people worldwide, and they can just, the reactionaries can pick a different one every day and try and ruin their life, and then it gets you in a rage. And so deplatforming doesn't necessarily mean taking away these people's voice, though maybe you would advocate for that or not. That's a different discussion. But certainly getting people who are the consumers of that out of that cycle of doing so. And I think that's similar to any sort of religious extremism too.
Yeah, I want to hear what you've tried, Stephen, but I do want to say this. I get ads on YouTube and different social media places, not ads, but videos telling me 5 techniques on how to escape if I'm handcuffed by a bandit, or if my car goes into a river, and how I can get out of my car, or how I can survive a shark attack. I really do. I get this. I don't know what the hell I'm searching for that I get this, but I do. And it's not realistic. What I need to focus my life on is healthy diet, exercise, good financial decisions, other things like that. And so your family members are being inundated with fake concerns, or concerns that are blown out of magnitude because it doesn't fit in with whoever's producing that media's agenda to either sell advertising revenue or political agenda to reform society. But Stephen, what have you tried? Like, what are some of the tactics that you've tried with your family? Because we've been talking. What about you?
So the trouble is that, and I might sound horrible for saying this, but I've given up on trying to convince them that, trans people are groomers. They are so lost in that anytime I try to explain to them the humanity of someone that's just trying to exist, it all, slides off of them like water off a duck's back. And immediately I'm brought back with, oh, well, you refer to them as she, and that's not correct. And then, bam, misgender. It's like, okay, so we're just not having the same conversation. My tactic at the moment is trying to, instead of getting them to go down that track with me, it's more just don't put so much of your energy and your time into hating people you don't know, and maybe doing something about the problems that you do know. Like, I don't think anybody can disagree at this point that, well, obviously there are people that do, but the most... I
don't even know what you're going to say, but yeah, there's people that disagree. You go ahead.
Most of us recognize that monopoly is bad, right? Most of us recognize that police brutality is bad.
The Settlers of Catan is far better, but you're talking about monopolies or the game? What are you talking about?
Yes.
They're both bad.
Like, most of us recognize those are bad things, and they agree with me on that. It's just I'm struggling to find a way to move that energy, move that passion into a productive path, and not so much on the all trans people are pedophiles and immigrants are bad. Like, there's so much energy there that can be used for something productive if I can just get them to shift a little bit.
Yeah. There it is. So what if you get them to, instead of taking a direct, didn't we just like crash a little probe into an asteroid recently? I think we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, the DART program.
And I bet you what they did, they didn't just come straight at it. They probably did a little side action. They probably banged it a little bit to the left or the right or up or down, if that even means anything in space. It probably doesn't. So what if, instead of going straight at their attack, their stupid position, oh no, I said it, you direct their attention to something neutral at first. Direct them to be productive members of society, contributing members to a charitable cause, cleaning up a highway or something like that. Something not particularly controversial. And maybe you can develop a culture of cooperation and community mindedness amongst your family members, chances are they're too busy sitting there watching Fox News or OANN or some garbage for the brain like that. But maybe they're not. Maybe they'll be motivated, and maybe starting there and then slowly working your way towards something where there may be some trans or gay or some folks like that volunteering as well. And then heaven forbid that one of the people there should be totally cool. And then maybe they'll have that moment where they're like, oh no, Carl is a trans man, but Carl's cool. Yeah, Carl's cool, fucker. What are you going to do about that now? So anyway, I don't know. That's a thought, but you can always just walk away. I know that we are told that blood is thicker than water. I think that's true, but there's a whole part of my family I don't talk to because they are not interesting to me, because I don't like their attitudes on certain subjects, and rather than fight all the time, I just walked away. So that's an option. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, is that you can use a lot of your energy up on trying to de-radicalize people, but sometimes it is just futile. You can try your best, and I think it's always good to, with your family, put in some effort. But when it gets to a certain point, you can acknowledge that your effort is better spent on something else. And if you want to make the world better for immigrants and trans people and other minority groups being hated by this reactionary garbage, then you can use your effort to do that. You can help their communities and help fund them and volunteer for services and teach. Most people are neutral on these issues. Most people don't have an opinion on trans people because they don't know anything. And they're much easier to win over than some diehard, viewers of idiot TV shows. So
yeah. That help you, Stephen?
Yeah, I might just have to detach a little bit more. The problem is that we're pretty reliant on them for childcare and a couple other things, because if I was to put my kid in any kind of daycare, it's basically the same amount as my rent these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's all part of the process, and I think maybe just trying to find some trans friends of mine that are willing to go to bat, like you, Katy, or like Arden. I have a couple of them that might be willing to do that. But at the same time, I don't want to put it on them to be like, hey, you need to defend your humanity for me, because I don't know how the fuck to do this.
You don't want to do that with a random. You don't want to be like, hey, Dave from work, you're trans. You should. Of mine. Yeah. But if with people who are putting ourselves out there, that's kind of what we're trying to do. So that's fine.
Yeah, I think a collateral attack where you are trying to steer, educate, find common ground, I don't know, but always with the option to walk away. It's a tricky one, but your energy might be better spent on people who are like, I don't understand why this is a problem. I'm seeing in the comments, I don't even care about LGBTQ issues. They don't affect me. I don't care. And I'm like, well, you better care, because those are human beings. And if you call yourself a humanist, then you better care about that. And if you don't, well, then I'm not interested in you either. I don't care about you. All right. Well, thanks a lot there.
Also,
go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Close up.
Yeah. Close up. What? Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, you were talking about people in the chat saying they shouldn't care, but I thought the whole point of being a skeptic, why are you watching this show if you don't consider yourself a skeptic? Even if you're a theist who considers yourself a skeptic, isn't the whole point here critical thinking?
Yeah.
And if you've got these people who are saying these things that are factually false, which are part of their whole ideology, no one just randomly hates trans people. It's always baked into, theocratic fascism or something like that. That's part of their worldview. Why aren't we being skeptical about that too? Surely, that's the whole point, right? Religion isn't the only thing that's factually false that people believe in.
It is. It is the whole point. And don't call me Shirley.